Interesting story here. So in an attempt to help maintain Democratic majorities in the House in the next midterm elections, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she sent contributions directly to House members facing re-election, creating what Politico described as, quote, a liability for members of her party in districts where her political brand is poisoned thanks to years of unrelenting Republican attacks.
So joining us now to discuss Democratic strategist Colin Rogero and cultural editor for The Federalist, Emily Jasinski. Colin, let me start with you because I think this is fascinating. So AOC, is often criticized within the Democratic Caucus for saying she only fundraises for herself. So she goes ahead and makes donations to many other members of the Democratic Caucus. And now many of those people in the Democratic Caucus are like, whoa, we don't want your money. So what do you make of this entire development?
I got to be honest. This is much ado about nothing amongst Democrats, because the idea that we weren't going to get attacked over AOC is like saying we weren't going to get attacked over Nancy Pelosi, who runs the Democratic establishment in Congress. It's absolutely just going to happen. And when in the heck did attack ads or attacking a political candidate have some element of truth in it, right? Like, we're all socialists anyways, according to any Republican attack ad anywhere in the country. So what I would do is actually celebrate the fact that she's engaging and saying, even though I may not have the exact same beliefs as these Democrats, we're a big party and I'm still for them. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, whereas a lot of other organizations don't necessarily do unless you align up perfectly with everything that they want. So I'm for it. We're going to get attacked over it anyways. It's not a big deal. What are they side with AOC versus they took $5,000 from AOC. I mean, like, this is the only thing the ads can say. So, to me, they're the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right point, Emily. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but let me just say these blue dog type, moderate Democrats, what I would call right-wing Democrats, they're like afraid of their own shadow on this stuff. And meanwhile, they're happy to take any kind of corporate money. That doesn't seem to bother them whatsoever. But the minute they get a little check in the mail from AOC, they just oh my God, what do I do now? Do I send it back? It's going to be on my report. Oh, this is the end of the world. It's really silly.
Yes, the Red Scare. No, it's totally I agree completely with everything that Colin said. First of all, Republicans are tying every single Democrat to socialism, whether or not they took money from AOC. Secondly, Democrats should be celebrating this because it does show that AOC actually is trying to make inroads and be cooperative. And right. I'm not saying that she should just roll over and be cooperative, but there's obviously something to be said for getting along with your caucus and trying to treat each other well. And so from the perspective of a Democrat, I would think that this is a good thing. It's kind of another indication that she's there's all of this sort of actual drama on the Hill, not nationally, but on the Hill, she still remains really polarizing to Democrats. And there are some personal issues that are getting baked into all of this politics. But I agree with everything Colin said and with what Crystal said about all of this. So you guys said it better than I could.
That's fascinating. Colin, I guess, Emily actually gets at a very interesting dynamic there, which is that a lot of the Democratic colleagues, it almost reminds me of the Tea Party dynamic, where a lot of them just absolutely hated each other on Capitol Hill. And they just really have no idea what to do here, especially because at that time, I'm talking 2010, the Tea Party people were one bringing all the money into the party. And so if you want money, you actually do have to do something here. So and like you said, in terms of the messaging, it's going to be there regardless. So if you're the centrist Democrat or whatever, how should you navigate this? Because it is true that on the one hand, there will be some political liability that's probably baked in regardless. How do you actually go forward and win?
That's a broader question and depends on each individual district. But the idea that we have, as Crystal put, that we have to be scared of our own shadow as Democrats is absolutely wrong, because people want to vote for someone that they know stands for something. And it's very simple and reasonable to say, look, my colleague AOC believes in things I don't necessarily believe in 100%, but we do agree on these things, that we got to lower the cost of health care, that we have to make education more accessible and more affordable for everyone, and, a myriad of issues that they believe in, Democrats generally and AOC, and things like raising minimum wage, which is widely popular amongst all groups, no matter what political affiliation you have. So that's what I would say, right? People who are going to vote against you because you took a check from AOC, you weren't going to win their vote anyway. So I don't even know why we would pay attention to chasing those folks, right? Just be about something and talk about it. That's it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Emily, they went all in on Joe Biden is a puppet of the socialist left, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in this last election. They tried that again in the Georgia Senate runoffs, and it may have worked in some limited pockets of the country, but overall, they lost the presidency, and they lost both of those Georgia Senate runoff races. The reasons for that obviously are complex and not solely devoted to their failures in terms of their attack. Bottom line is, I don't know that this socialism thing is as effective as they think it's going to be. We actually covered some polling here from Chuck Roach's group, specifically looking at Latinos, which was one of the areas where it was like, oh, well, maybe with this one community, it really landed. And even there, it was a minuscule concern as compared to, hey, how about I get some jobs and how about I get another relief check? Ultimately, who's going to do that? That's the person I'm going to vote for.
Yeah, and again, I think it really does depend heavily on who you're talking to and where you're talking to them and how you're talking about it. And that sounds really obvious, but I mean that in terms of Saagar points this out a lot. When we're talking about what socialism is in a Republican attack ad, a lot of people in DC think that it's an economic attack, when often it actually has more cultural implications for people who are watching it. And if Republican attack ads are sort of the strategy behind them is smart, which that is usually not the case, it is more of a cultural anxiety that it's tapping into with a lot of people. And I don't know, I would love to see the polling that Chuck has, because I don't know if that's true with Latino voters, but I don't want to minimize the sort of like effect that AOC would have in some districts. I mean, there's some places, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, suburbs, where you can, if you're making it easier to tie a candidate to AOC, I can see why a Democrat would be like, whoa, I don't want that check. Like, they may have a reasonable they may have a reasonable argument there. But at the same time, no, I think on a national scale, Republicans need to be, it's not a misunderstanding from the left's perspective of what the socialism argument is. It's actually Republicans who are making that argument who don't understand that they're tapping into cultural anxiety. I think it really depends on where to.
Extraordinarily well said, as usual. Okay, guys, stick with us. More Team Rising coming up.